A qualified positive prognosis for the U.S. economy. Dr. Greenspan says the patient is recovering. It could be the shortest bout with recession ever. So what's next? Turning on the liberators. Anti-Americanism on the rise in Afghanistan. A security sweep at the Boston airport. 20 workers busted for allegedly lying about their identities. And Eye on America, using fake IDs to board a plane. CBS takes you undercover to put airport security to the test.
This is the CBS Evening News, with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. It withstood a high-tech meltdown, a stampede by Wall Street bears, an attack by terrorists, and a recession. But the battered U.S. economy is coming back. The chairman of the Federal Reserve told Congress today the nation is pulling out of the recession that officially began last March. Alan Greenspan now predicts a moderate recovery, with the economy growing as much as 3%. That would be nearly 3 times better than last year. CBS's Anthony Mason has more about the coming back economy.
The economy's chief meteorologist delivered a promising forecast today. On Capitol Hill, Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan said the nation's first recession in a decade is ending.
The recuperative powers of the United States economy have been remarkable.
Even in the hardest hit sector, manufacturing, there were signs of a comeback today. Orders to factories for durable goods jumped in January, led by strong demand for aircraft and high-tech equipment.
So I think the point of greatest risk is behind us, and we are beginning to recover.
Another key signal, after a year of sweeping sales to clear their inventories, companies are beginning to restock their shelves.
That replenishment means more orders, means more production, it means more jobs.
But the Fed chairman warned unemployment will likely get worse before it gets better, and that the recovery will be modest, with risks still on the horizon.
Now, the big risk that Alan Greenspan referred to was that gives you a big pop to the economy in one quarter as people restock their shelves. But if sales don't pick up, that peters out.
10,000 is pro.
But the stock market at first was encouraged by Greenspan's outlook, the Dow surging more than 100 points. The rally evaporated in the afternoon, though. Veteran trader Arthur Cashin says the market still can't quite shake their case of Enronitis.
The idea that there may be imaginative accounting or maybe even imaginary accounting out there is going to take a while to get over. You're not going to be able to say, hey, there's nothing wrong with my company. Talk to my auditor. Nobody's sure about him either.
But economists are increasingly convinced that this recovery is for real. The brakes are off, one said, and the economy is ready to accelerate again. Dan?
Anthony Mason, thanks. Russia's top diplomat worried publicly today about a U.S. plan to send special forces troops to the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. They would train Georgia's army to fight terrorists thought to be operating from a gorge near Russia's embattled province of Chechnya. The Russian foreign minister said a U.S. presence, quote, could further aggravate the situation in Chechnya. One place where the United States does not want to aggravate the situation is Afghanistan, currently home to about 5,000 U.S. combat troops. But as CBS's Elizabeth Palmer reports tonight, increasing numbers of Afghans say they think the Americans have already overstayed their welcome.
Almost 4 months after the collapse of the Taliban, the first signs of anti-Americanism are surfacing in Afghanistan. CBS News obtained this leaflet, which is secretly being circulated here in Kandahar. The message is plain. All Muslims must rise up and continue the holy war against the Americans and their puppets who have invaded our land, it says, and goes on to say it's the duty of all Muslims to drive Americans out of Afghanistan. Local people say the leaflets are being issued by former al-Qaeda extremists still at large, determined to inflame the traditional hatred of foreigners. Inside the mosques, they preach against interference from Iran and Pakistan. Outside the mosques, you hear something else.
I want the money of the United States.
Most people here don't just resent the presence of Americans and Europeans as aid workers or peacekeepers. What they're really frightened of are their non-Islamic values. Afghans fear that a way of life that's barely changed in more than 1,000 years is about to be destroyed by the temptations of Western technology and liberal ideas.
There is one aspect of Afghan life which Westerners do want to destroy immediately: drugs. Farmers know the United States is behind plans to destroy the spring opium crop, and they resent it. Drugs baron Haji Bashar won't criticize the U.S. directly, but he made it clear he's a very influential man who can overthrow any opponent. It is possible to provoke people against anyone who tries to control this country, he says. Although Americans are now enjoying a kind of honeymoon as the liberators of Afghanistan, it's clear there are powerful forces here with a vested interest in provoking violent opposition. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Kandahar.
U.S. officials hoping to learn if Osama bin Laden was killed earlier this month said today they're trying to get DNA samples from the bin Laden family. They want to test the DNA against human remains from the site of a CIA missile attack in Afghanistan to see if they match the terrorists. The United States today offered a $5 million reward for information leading to the kidnappers who murdered reporter Daniel Pearl in Pakistan. The U.S. also wants custody of jailed militant Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, who admits he planned Pearl's kidnapping. But as CBS's Richard Roth explains, Pakistani officials say they're worried about the risks if they extradite Saeed.
Stepped-up security at Saeed's Karachi jail today demonstrates why extradition's a tricky issue for Pakistan, even dangerous. A phone caller warned of a rocket attack on the building if Saeed's given up to America.
I would be not stating anything about the extradition at this point of time because it's too premature to say so.
But President Pervez Musharraf, who offered condolences today to Daniel Pearl's widow, is under heavy pressure from Washington to turn over the chief suspect in Pearl's kidnapping. And signs are he's responding. Pakistan's now sending clear signals that in principle it wouldn't object to Saeed's extradition. But if it's to happen, timing will be a major issue to resolve first. Authorities say there are legal requirements to meet. Some are insisting on a trial here first. They still haven't recovered a body or a murder weapon. And by all accounts, Saeed's not giving up much to interrogators. The delay building a hard case against the suspected mastermind of the crime is causing worry.
He may suddenly escape, or he may suddenly commit suicide, or he may be killed trying to escape. And if that were to happen, then the trail would end there.
A fatal gun attack on a mosque near the capital overnight points up Pakistan's predicament. The government wants to show it's cooperative with America, while it needs to prove it can deal with terrorists on its own. Richard Roth, CBS News, Islamabad.
There are new questions tonight about air travel security in this country after the arrest of 20 people at a major international airport. They all worked at the airport. But as CBS's Byron Pitts reports, the allegation is they should never have been hired.
In Boston's Logan Airport, they were security screeners, jet fuelers, people who clean terminal restrooms, all with security clearance, all with access to jet planes, the most secure areas of the airport. In all 20, foreign nationals say federal investigators use fake Social Security cards and green cards to get their jobs.
The investigation began 9 days after the September 11th terrorist attacks, in line with Operation Safe Travel.
Operation Safe Travel led to a similar crackdown at Salt Lake City International Airport just prior to the Olympics. There, 69 employees were arrested, 271 fired. 6 of the 20 busted in Boston worked for Argonbright Security, which had been cited for multiple security problems in the past. The feds have conducted similar investigations in Atlanta, Miami, and Las Vegas.
It's important to stress that none of these 20 defendants are suspected or charged with having any terrorist connections. There's no evidence to indicate that any of the charged individuals sought to do anything other than obtain gainful employment.
Employment that's now under the microscope nationwide.
They may indeed be hardworking people, but the fact remains, life changed after 9/11. We need to change as well.
Tonight, most of the suspects are in jail. They could face prison time or deportation. Dan?
Byron Pitts, live in Boston. Federal officials today announced charges against a Jordanian man who was allegedly part of a fake ID ring linked to 2 of the September 11th hijackers. The accused is charged with producing phony identification. As CBS showed you last night, it is extremely easy to obtain a fake ID, including a driver's license. For tonight's Eye on America, CBS's Sandra Hughes tests how well airlines and airports defend against fraudulent identification.
Our CBS News undercover investigation tested airport security using a $150 fake driver's license to purchase tickets on 3 major airlines.
See your ID? Oh, yeah, sure.
The tickets were used at 5 different airports in California and Nevada. We found that ticket and security agents paid little attention to the counterfeit driver's license, which contained a made-up name and address. Not one of them even asked for a second look at it or for it to be removed from the wallet. The tickets and fake ID gave us access beyond security checkpoints and onto several flights. The license was looked at almost 20 different times and never detected as a fake.
Going to LaGuardia? No, Kennedy, I'm sorry.
Yeah, JFK.
Need to see your picture ID.
No. Ready to go?
Thank you.
We showed our undercover video to California Senator Barbara Boxer, a member of the Senate Transportation Committee.
There didn't seem to be an understanding of the problem that you've exposed. Clearly, they glanced at the ID, glanced at the person's face, glanced at the ticket, but that's not the issue. If it's all phony to begin with, it doesn't really matter.
Especially if the airlines are relying on FBI lists of known terrorists.
If they can go ahead, change their name, get a phony ID, buy a ticket in the phony name, we're way behind the 8 ball here. We'll never catch them.
Our fake ID was checked by ticket agents and security checkpoint screeners employed or under contract to 3 major airlines, United, American, and Southwest. All 3 airlines and the Federal Aviation Administration declined to talk on camera about our investigation. One former FAA security official isn't surprised the government wouldn't talk about something he says it's ignored for years.
I think that the ID process is basically bogus. It's one of those make you feel good, comforting things, but in effect does nothing for security.
We showed our counterfeit license to fraud expert Chris Bonzer before we turned it over to law enforcement.
Oh, this is an excellent ID.
But he says properly trained airport workers should be able to detect it as a fake.
By looking at this, I would be able to identify this immediately as being counterfeit.
The California Department of Motor Vehicles offered to train California airport employees, but the airports never took them up on it. This handheld scanner that costs as little as $90 can detect a counterfeit driver's license by reading the magnetic stripe on the back. 39 states and Washington, D.C. currently use the security stripe feature.
For a very, very small investment, you can have technology that will verify that document and keep the bad guy off the plane.
The scanner is being used at Boston's Logan Airport, and the federal government says it will start using it at Baltimore Washington International Airport in the near future. But there are 200 different forms of state government-issued identification cards.
Today there aren't any minimum features that are required. We need to have both overt and covert features on the driver's license.
Lewis wants one standard driver's license, an idea opposed by many privacy advocates. But she says it may be the only way to stay a step ahead of the counterfeiters and help keep the nation's skies secure. In Los Angeles, this is Sandra Hughes for Eye on America.
A possible solution to the fake ID problem is what's called a smart card. It would include a photograph, fingerprint, and detailed personal information and would be issued only after a background check. In a CBS News poll out tonight, half the public said they would be willing to carry a smart card. 44% would not. As for airport security, less than half of Americans think the government has done enough to tighten it. Only 38% say the airlines have done all they can. It's the Wednesday edition of the CBS Evening News, and up next, a key defense witness testifies in the murder trial of Andrea Yates. It's her husband. This was an emotional, possibly pivotal day in the murder trial of Andrea Yates, the Texas mother who drowned her 5 children. The jury heard testimony from a key defense witness, her husband. CBS's Maureen Maher is covering the trial in Houston. Maureen?
Dan,
And through the testimony of a devastated but loyal husband, the defense tried to paint a picture of a family that had no concept of the magnitude of Andrea Yates' mental illness or any real idea of how to deal with it. Rusty Yates arrived at court today prepared to support his wife and defend decisions he made about her care.
It's going to show that she was a loving mother and it had been out of character for her to have done what she did.
On the stand, Yates talked about an erratic lifestyle, moving his wife and their 4 small boys from campground to campground, first in an RV, then in a converted Greyhound bus. With his wife sitting just a few feet from him, Yates described how 2 weeks after Andrea first tried to kill herself with sleeping pills in 1999, he found her in the bathroom with a knife to her throat. He told jurors, he said, "Andrea, give me the knife," to which she unemotionally responded, "Let me do this." Yates wrestled the knife away, but he didn't take her to the hospital until the next day. The defense is hoping the jury will conclude it's one example of how Rusty Yates' decisions may have unwittingly contributed to his wife's problem.
When Andrea Yates needed the most help, she didn't get it from the one person who should have been in a position to help her the most.
Rusty Yates told jurors that following the knife incident, his wife was given the powerful antipsychotic drug Haldol and went from being completely catatonic to being, quote, more open with me than she had ever been. It really gave me a lot of hope. Earlier, psychiatrists who had been treating Andrea Yates following those 2 attempted suicides testified, telling jurors that she had strongly urged the Yates not to conceive a child following this time period. She said that she could not conclude that there would be no problems even if they used those antipsychotic drugs. Still, 3 months later, Andrea Yates was pregnant with her 5th child, Mary. Dan?
Maureen Maher reporting live from the courthouse in Houston. The FBI confirms it has subpoenaed samples of anthrax spores from several laboratories, hoping this will help identify the source of anthrax letters sent through the mail. The Bureau is also denying a CBS News report last night that it identified a copying machine in New Jersey as the one used by the anthrax murderer to make duplicates of the letters. An FBI spokesman says officially the Bureau has instead narrowed its search for that machine. In the Middle East today, gunfire killed 4 Palestinians and 1 Israeli, and a Palestinian woman blew herself up at an Israeli roadblock in the West Bank, injuring 2 Israeli police officers. The violence has spurred interest in a recently refurbished peace plan from Saudi Arabia. A European diplomat met with the Crown Prince today and says he is, quote, determined to move forward with efforts to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Fighting between government troops and a combined drug cartel and Marxist guerrilla force in Colombia intensified today, and the leader of the rebels predicted it will lead to, quote, total war in which thousands will die. Colombian security forces, using helicopters and other equipment provided by the United States, are pushing deep into a former rebel safe haven. But the rebels, well-equipped and well-financed with drug profits, have struck back from jungle hideouts, attacking villages and transportation throughout the region. Fierce late winter storms battered northern Europe overnight. The wind gusted to nearly 100 miles per hour, toppling trees and blocking roads in Britain. Heavy rain sent rivers over their banks in France, Belgium, and Germany. And in South Korea, amateur video captured the crash of a military fighter jet that caught fire during a training exercise. The plane, a South Korean version of the American F-16, exploded in a rice paddy. The pilot had ejected in time and landed safely. Next here on the CBS Evening News, Tillie Tooter spent 3 days trapped in her car because of him. Today, they met face to face. CBS ends tonight with an update to a story of a survivor. It took 1.5 years, but today 85-year-old Tillie Tooter got her day in court. If you remember her, you knew she would. In August of 2000, a driver who fell asleep at the wheel knocked Tooter's car off a Florida highway, but didn't tell the police. Tooter was trapped inside her car, which came to rest in a bug-infested swamp.
I screamed, I ranted, I raved, I swore.
I cursed.
After 3 days, a highway trash collector found Tooter's car by chance. She had survived on a cough drop, a peppermint, a stick of gum, and water from a rain-soaked sock. Today, in a plea deal in court, the driver who'd left her stranded, 23-year-old Scott Campbell, gave Tillie Tooter what she wanted most.
Miss Tooter, I'd like to tell you from the bottom of my heart that I'm truly sorry for the ordeal you went through.
Campbell got 5 years probation, no jail time, and he'll pay Tillie Tooter's medical bills. Tooter told Campbell she bears no grudge and wishes him a good life. She got her apology and had the last word. You knew she would. The unsinkable Tillie Tooter, part of our world tonight. We invite you to join us again tomorrow for the CBS Evening News. Till then, Dan Rather reporting. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
Reporting Sick Kids, an eye-opening eye on America tomorrow. Experience CBS News.